Hello, everybody. Welcome to ISD 110. I'm, of course, Professor S, and today is a quiz day. So, don't be intimidated. It's going to be great. Anyways, let's kind of get into this, shall we? All right, so what we're going to talk about is I'm going to talk about hardware. I'm going to talk about quiz prep, which is the same thing that I talked about in the last video, and then I'll go over due dates. All right, so starting off with hardware. So integrated circuits came in after transistors. And so we talked about vacuum tubes before that were being used like for the ENIAC, where they'd get hot, they were kind of unreliable. And transistors were like not that. They were much more reliable, they're less warm, faster. They were great. And they were doing really well. And then there was a need to come up with something that would have a bunch of transistors in one place, and that was the integrated circuits. And there was these chips of transistors. And from these transistors would come, or integrated circuits would come microprocessors. Now, one of the things that helped move the integrated circuits was the moon landing, actually. The one of the really cool things. So this is a thing that I took, a picture that I took from the Computer History Museum, and it's really cool because this is like, so the idea is it's like computers back then, like when they were just like, think about them, they took up whole bunches of rooms, even though they were transistors. The transistors weren't tiny. Okay, so the computers were kind of big, and it was kind of the bigger the computer, the more better the computer could be. The better the computing power it had. It was kind of a it was something that people were proud of. So, like for instance, this was something that would be like a company would flex by having this on like the first floor to show like, look how smart we are with these big computers. So, anyways, with landing on the moon, one of the really cool things that happened is like they needed to fit something that could help land the module onto the moon, and it wasn't something that they could get a pilot to do, so they needed a computer to do it, and so the crazy thing is like, well, how do we get a computer onto a spaceship? And so spaceships, think about the spaceship that landed on the moon, not that big, but computers back then were huge. So they were able to work to get a big computer that would fit in this box right here. And it was thanks to some integrated circuits, and there's like some really cool things that they did to build it and that sort of thing. The programming is really cool. If you ever get a chance, I definitely recommend looking into the history on this, because this is super cool. But I just wanted to add that as to the integrated circuits. So the idea with the integrated circuits was it allowed for computers to kind of get a little smaller. It's one of the reasons. And so another thing is like from those integrated circuits, we came up with microprocessors, as I said before, and that's when we come up with the CPU. CPU is the brain of your computer. It stands for Central Processing Unit, and it has a few different parts. ALU stands for Arithmetic Logic Unit. It performs addition, subtractions, and sometimes other arithmetic operations, as well as logic operations like AND or XOR not, like those sort of things. And it's like the arithmetic is like what goes on in your computer. Think about like how it kind of deals with all its sorts of little data. So like all the processes can bog down to those calculations. The control unit is the part of the processor that tells the computer components, such as the memory, the ALU, the input-output devices, how to respond to computer instructions. So it's like, all right, so it does the calculations, and so then it's like, all right, now that means you do this, and that means you do this. So it's all part of the processor. The clock synchronizes the CPU's components, like the drum beat synchronize a marching band. Um, and so the idea is it's the flow of the data is very important, and so like how it handles the different things with the 0 1 0 1 0 1 or 1 0, like you get the point, right? And so one of the things that makes a CPU better than another is how fast it is, and the thing that's changing with the speed is the clock frequency. And so one of the things that happens with this is um, well, generally speaking, the higher, the faster it goes, the hotter it gets. And so one of the interesting things I'm just trying to say is that oftentimes with people that try to get the most out of their CPU, they will work on overclocking it. And what that means is uh, interacting with the that frequency in such a way that it kind of pushes um, it goes at a faster speed than maybe the manufacturer recommended. And so there's just interesting hurdles that have to be overcome to make that happen. So oftentimes they have like or these days CPUs that are overclocked will have things like liquid cooling, or like really a big focus on that overclocking is cooling down the CPU so it doesn't get too hot. Now, the GPU was originally created for graphics. It stands for Graphics Processing Unit. And one of the things is it's very similar to a CPU in that it's a processing unit. But the idea is the CPU does a lot of really intense calculations, whereas the GPU does a ton of simple calculations. So sometimes it's interesting to see, like, when coming up with solutions for different things, if it makes more sense to go crazy with a GPU as opposed to a really good CPU. So if you're having a bunch of people interact with something and they just need to do a bunch of tiny different things, then a GPU could make a lot of sense. But if you're doing a really intense calculation, CPU might make the most sense. So some of the ways that you might have heard about GPUs lately is, well, one of the things is that there was most recently a big improvement on GPUs lately that came out in the fall for gaming, and so the next gen of gaming started beginning in this fall, and so that's interesting how has been developing. But anyways, the thing that I'm trying to talk about more than just graphics is that it's been interesting that, like, those bunch of different calculations, so instead of just, like, the idea is it's like a bunch of little calculations. So if you think about, like, the matrix of moving something, it's a bunch of little calculations to say, all right, this piece needs to go here, this piece needs to go here, and this thing here. And so anyways, those bunch of tiny calculations or simple calculations, people have found other uses for them. So I think the machine here that I have pictured is for data mining, or I believe specifically for Bitcoin mining. And so oftentimes with Bitcoin mines, they'll have rows and rows of GPUs that are using to do a bunch of different calculations at once. And it's the benefit to having these GPUs instead of like a really good CPU is that it's much, much cheaper. Another thing that is used for GPUs often is machine learning. Some intense machine learning can happen with GPUs. Another important thing is storage. Storage On a computer, these days it comes in a few different things. So first of all, there's the cache. This is some data that's or some storage space that's on a processor. A lot of processors, they need to store like a little bit of information, and so like in its calculation, so it's like so think about it like it only looks at so much information at once, and so it's like if you're adding two numbers together, you need to say you need to hold on to one bit of information while you're reading another. And so that's why you may have some of that cache sort of thing. Memory, or RAM, temporarily holds data, and it's considered volatile. And the reason is because when the electricity is turned off, that data is lost. And so oftentimes when you're using a program, some of that stored information that's not being stored on a hard drive or a solid state drive will stay in the memory and just be used very quickly. And then for more long-term storage, you might use a solid-state drive or SSD or hard drive HDD. And something to kind of keep in mind with these different devices is that the further away from the processor that these are, the slower it is at getting that information. Okay, so like getting it from the RAM, really quick. But even when you're thinking about the cache and the RAM, the cache is like even faster information. Now, the drives that I have up there, so the memory is in the bottom, is the bottom one, and then in the kind of middle one that's off to the left, that's a hard drive, and that's like part of it is that it looks like it has a disk in there because it does. And then off to the top right corner is a solid state drive. And so it's just really, one of the things that's like, I think is just really interesting is like the development of these solid state drives. So solid state drives, like generally speaking, at least right now, the hard drives can store more information cheaper. And then they also, rule of thumb is if if something happens to a hard drive, you could take that disk part out and recover some information. Whereas, at least previously with solid state drives, if something happens to that drive, then you lost everything in there. But the other thing is that's like starting to change over time. It's becoming more of something that you can get the information from. So solid state drives aren't volatile. So like when you turn off your computer, the solid state drives will hold the information. But the thing is like oftentimes they can be faster than hard drives. And so the interesting thing is like, so which is better? And it just depends upon what you need it for. And some servers, they might even actually have both of them, a solid state drive and a hard drive. So hard drive would be maybe for more long-term storage that isn't needed as much, and solid state drive is like things that are being used more right then and there. Input devices. So input devices, I kind of talked about this before when thinking about inputs for a program. There's a keyboard, a mouse, microphone, sometimes a gaming controller. Pictured here, this is the Xbox came up with the adaptive controller, and the thing that's really cool about this is it provides accessibility to people that struggle with holding a normal Xbox controller. So whatever Microsoft's reasoning for coming up with this, I think it's really cool that how it addresses accessibility. And so the main controller part is then that kind of top part where it looks like two big pads with a arrow controller off to the left. And then there's a bunch of wires coming from it. It's that white box. And so the thing is it's like that's the main controller part, and there's all these wires that come up with that have the different other boxes or buttons to it. And so depending upon um, the user's accessibility, they can tailor an arrangement to be something that they could use for them, which is really, really cool, I think. So output devices, we kind of talked about this a little bit before, thinking about the output for a program. And so part of the output could be to an output device. So one of those things could be a sound. So like if you think about playing a game and the character goes to a place that they're not supposed to, then there's usually some sort of noise that lets you know it. So like if I'm just thinking about like Mario, when he essentially dies, there's like this weird sad music. And it's a disappointing, if not annoying thing. It's weird, but it lets you know that your character's your turn's done, right? Another output device are computer monitors. First one that I have up here is a CRT, which stands for cathode ray tube, and these are big things. I don't even know if you guys have seen these much in your lifetime, but they're big devices. I don't want to talk too much about those. But then there's LCDs, which stands for liquid crystal display, and then there's plasma, and that's another thing. And then there's the OLED, and like the OLED displays are really cool because it allows for screens to get really small. There's been interesting advancements to like what's going to be the next level, what's going to be the next kind of display, and it's interesting to see where they're kind of going with this. But OLED, I feel like, is still like going strong and like wowing people with their different things. Like for instance, a lot of the flip phones are able to, the folding phones are using OLED displays. This TV that I have displayed here is an LG TV that rolls up. And so when you're ready to watch it, it comes from that base and unrolls itself and comes up. And so it's just interesting how it's an interesting use of OLED, because the thing is, it's like OLED is super thin, and it's considered usually better display than plasma and LCD. Anyways, moving on. Printer. Printers are kind of interesting because like unlike monitors, I mean like printers, there's been advancements in them, but like you don't see many CRTs around anymore. You see them less frequently than LCDs and plasmas and LEDs, but anyways, like inkjets, lasers. Well, you don't see too many dot matrix printers that much anymore, but thermal printers, laser printers, inkjets, they're going strong right now. So like the different things with a inkjet is that inkjet's interesting. It takes usually cartridges of ink and it sprays it onto the paper or whatever surface it's putting it on. A laser printer is an interesting device because it's plasma gas-filled cells rotating an ink drum that is electrostatically charged by a laser. And these charged areas form a pattern that picks up a powdered ink, which is the toner, and places that ink on the paper. Then the paper goes through a fuser unit that heats it and to permanently bond the ink to the paper, or it's supposed to at least. And so that's why oftentimes when like a Xerox machine that uses that's a laser printer, that's why like when you use a laser printer it comes out warm. So generally, rule of thumb with these different ones is like inkjet is it's a little, oftentimes the cartridges are cheaper, but you have to replace them more. Laser, the toner cartridges, well, one, they could be messy. It's gross. I don't know if you guys have worked much with copy machines, but they can get ridiculous fast. But the toner's like gross. It gets everywhere. Anyways, the idea is it's like toner cartridges don't need to be replaced as much, but when you do, they're generally really expensive. Though I feel like prices for both of those have been going down. Dot matrix papers or printers, those are the ones that come to mind. Are those super old printers that would have the strips on the side to move the printer along. I don't want to talk too much about that, but the thermal printer, that's something that's used a lot, and you'll see that oftentimes a lot of receipts use thermal printer paper. So when you go to a store, you get a receipt that's generally from a thermal printer, and so what that is it's a special paper that gets heated up, and it's I don't think there's any ink that goes into it, so it just heats up like that spot and scorches it. Essentially, I mean, it's not that simple. It's not like burning it in there. It's just applying heat to specific locations to make it look like it's printing on there, and that's how it works. It's really interesting. But that's also, if you notice, like with the thermal paper, maybe you leave it in your wallet like I do longer than you probably should, and you'll notice that it gets black, and that's because of the heat. So let's talk about different types of computers now. So first, we're going to start off with a server. A server is a computer that provides a service over a network. That could be providing email, could be providing internet, or could be providing file or printer services, or lots of different things. But the idea is like with a server, you have a client that uses a server. And a client is a machine, it's a program, but it's not a person. Right? So what you have is people that use the server generally are using a client that uses a server. So the people that are using the server directly, those are people that are maintaining it, generally speaking. They're not the ones that it's intended to be used for. They're helping it run. They're making it so that the clients can use it. And so client isn't like a customer. A client is just what we call that device, that program that will use the server. I have a game on my oftentimes a lot of the games that are used on internet, they are clients that use the server. Anyways, PC, personal computer. That could be a desktop or a laptop. So laptop is something that folds and you can generally speaking, you can fold in your, and put in your bag. Desktop, it's a little bit more difficult because it's not meant to move around as much. Tablets and smartphones, something new to this century, where they are, now they don't really, they don't fold generally that much. I guess they're starting to, but the idea is like there's these devices usually with touch screens. A supercomputer, these are computers that are specifically designed to do big computation. Particle accelerators could use these. Oftentimes supercomputers are used for like doing weather calculations and stuff like that. One of the interesting things is like there's a huge difference between a supercomputer and a PC, and the analogy behind that is like the way that I think about it is like with cars. And so like sure, the supercomputer is going to be way faster and more powerful in every single way, but it's not going to be practical for doing personal computing stuff. It's not going to make sense to do a spreadsheet on a supercomputer. It's not going to make sense to do emails. Oftentimes with supercomputers, you need a team of trained people to use it, sort of thing. You just can't start using it. It takes a process. So anyways, like the analogy that I was talking about is thinking about this NASCAR. So with these racing cars, they're really built for speed, and like they're probably faster than my car, right? But the thing is like it doesn't make sense for me to, like, let's say I had the money for a race car. I'm not going to buy a race car for casual driving, right? It's not going to make sense. Like right now I'm recording and it's dark out, and it's not going to make sense for me to take a NASCAR if I need something at the grocery store, because one, they don't have headlights. They're not comfortable at all. Like they don't really have windows other than the windshield, so it's going to be cold. There's no radio. It's not going to be comfortable. It's just not designed for that thing. Those race cars are designed for a specific task, and that is to go fast around a track, right? And so that's kind of the same thing with supercomputers, is that sure, they are more powerful than a tablet, a smartphone, laptop, or desktop, or than anyone that you will ever see. But that doesn't mean it's practical for doing what you would use those desktop and laptops for. The next type of computer is an embedded computer, and these are computers that you would see, that you wouldn't see, but that use computers. So think about like your smart fridge, your Fitbit, anything that does calculations that's not really one of these other things is usually considered an embedded computer. Okay. All right, so now let's talk about quiz prep stuff. So the quiz prep stuff, this is stuff that I talked about in the last video, but I'm talking about it again. So first of all, the questions covered for the quiz that is now available is there's brief history on computing, programming, and hardware. Things to study are notes, old lectures. If you need to revisit them, you can revisit them. I recommend updating your notes if you need to, so you can use them faster. And then Zybooks is also helpful. And as I explained before, like with the lectures and the Zybooks, is that my thought process is like the lecture isn't just to highlight the things that I think are important in Zybooks. I will do that. But there are some things in Zybooks that I think, you know what, Zybooks did a great job. I don't think I need to go any more depth with this. And then there's other things that's like, Zybooks didn't mention this enough, and I'll talk about this more. So there's like, just, it's good to make sure you look at the material that we talked about in class and that the Zybooks goes over. Anyways, as the quiz will work is, quiz is now available. It's been available since whenever we finished talking about this material, and it's going to be available until 3 p.m. Eastern Time on Thursday. And you have to take this in one sitting, and it's about 30 minutes long. And the only thing is like, don't forget to do the quiz, and then also make sure you get the chapter 3 from section 1 to section 6 before class on Monday. And that's all I have for y'all. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please press the like button. It lets me know I'm doing something right. If you have any questions about any of the content, please send an email through Canvas to both me and the rest of the teaching team, and we will get back to you as soon as possible. Do not send it through normal email. You will not get as fast response. If you have any suggestions for how I can make these videos better, please leave in the comments below. Don't forget to roundhouse kick the subscribe button and ring the bell to get notified for when I post the next video. Anyway, I think that's good for now, and I will see you all next class.